G2 will finish outside of the top 2, Splyce will surprise everyone, and the upcoming 2018 EU LCS Spring Split will be the most entertaining EU LCS split we've seen to date, and the most competitive one, more importantly. Hey everyone, my name is Darius Matuszak. I'm the head editor of The Shot Caller. I've spent my past year at the EU LCS doing interviews, and I'll be doing that this year as well. And this is the Reddit special, where I'll be presenting you my 2018 EU LCS Spring Split predictions after the regular split, not including playoffs, because playoffs is always kind of its own thing, based on the rosters we now know, and based on just my personal experience and predictions. Now, just in general terms, before we get into the specific placements of the teams, I'm so very excited about this, because in previous EU LCS splits, we've always had one or two teams that were clearly better than the rest of the bunch. Like two teams that were just S tier, and yeah, you had some A tier or B tier teams that looked good, but they weren't good enough to actually challenge those one or two top teams, you know? Like, you'd not expect a team like Misfits or Unicorns to challenge previous iterations of G2. I know Misfits beat G2 in Summer Split, but at the end of the day, realistically, you were always able, or most people were always able to correctly predict the standings at the end of the day, which I think will be very hard. There's been tons of discussion about this upcoming split, especially about the top 5, because they look so close to one another, and even the bottom tier teams, you know. I'm very excited about what people will think about these placements. There's also been a Reddit vote, which I found very interesting, and I agree with at some parts, and at others I simply don't. And yeah, let's just get straight into it. I know people like to skip certain teams and stuff, so here is my list of predictions, and if you want to just watch the video, you can just continue, but if you only want to listen to specific team reasonings, why I put specific teams in specific positions, you can check out the video description, and there will be timestamps where I'll be, where you can just click on, and so for example, Team Vitality will be minute X, seconds X, and you can just click on that if you want to listen to why I placed Team Vitality at 9th place, which I think is lower than the Reddit community actually. Alright, so let's move our way up from the bottom to the top and start with Giants Gaming. Now, there isn't that much to say about Giants Gaming in all honesty. They had to, well, they lost their roster essentially to Vitality, and they had to pick up players that were left from other teams at the end of the transfer season. They picked up Joko, Betsy, and Steelback, who I think the latter is a decent ADC, but Joko is not that good of a jungler anymore, and Betsy has his games when you can get him on Swain. He's actually pretty damn decent, but in all honesty, if you look at the overall quality of EU LCS mid laners, it's going to be very tough for Betsy to still hold up. He's obviously played for a very long time, so he's got some experience and stuff, but in general terms, it's not a very good looking team. Ruin in the top lane has played for SK Gaming and a Belgium team before. He's a Korean top laner. Nobody I asked really knew what he was on about and like how good he is. In all honesty, that doesn't look too well. Targamas, 17-year-old Belgium support, looks interesting, but at the end of the day, you know, that team is just a team that had to be stitched together essentially, and luckily for them there won't be any relegations between spring and summer split of EU LCS this time, and by summer 2018, by the end of the summer split 2018, they might have figured stuff out to not get relegated. Maybe they're not even planning to go for franchising. I would expect them to. That said, the national leagues do look more and more interesting, so maybe that's just them trying to figure things out already. But in all honesty, that roster does not look very promising at all. Like, there are other rosters that look shaky, of course, in this list, but at least they have some merits to them, you know, some upsides where it can go like, yeah, these are probably the weaknesses of the team, but maybe they have these and these strengths. Whereas with this team, I just go like, yeah, well, there aren't really any strengths either. So yeah, definitely for me, they're gonna end up in last place. Vitality in 9th place. Now this is an interesting one, because Vitality, I believe, in the Reddit vote got placed 7th, And I believe a lot of people, specifically French people and Portuguese people, rated them very, very highly. I even saw a Reddit thread rating Vitality in third, where I was like, are you Portuguese? Yeah, okay, that explains it. Because they picked up Mini Trupax as ADC. Looks very interesting. I'm very excited to see him in LCS. And they have got Gilius, I guess. But in general terms, the quality of the players doesn't look too promising. I mean, they do have Yamato Cannon as a coach, which should be decent. But at the end of the day, if you look at the other rosters, they just look that bit better when you just look at the player quality and also in terms of stability. Now, people have told me, okay, they've played together for a very long time on Giants, so they know each other, they got synergy and all that kind of stuff, which is true, and it can be a benefit. However, at the end of the day, you also gotta keep in mind that Misfits Academy have also played for a very long time together, and then when they came into LCS, rebranded or got picked up by Mysterious Monkeys, they still fell apart. So while it can be very helpful, that synergy and that relationship between players, it's not the one key to success that's going to end up, you know, getting them into a playoffs position or anything. In 8th place, we got Roccat. Now, tons of discussion about Roccat. Many people, especially Reddit, for example, Reddit put them in last place in the Reddit vote. And a lot of people have said, yeah, nah, this team looks like a clusterfuck. The players look so randomly thrown together, kind of like Ninjas in Pajamas were last split. I don't necessarily agree with that notion, and I think people are underestimating the Korean players in Profit and Blank, because they do, or at least Blank speaks very good English, for example, so that, for example, shouldn't be an issue. That said, some of the players, for example, Hikyu and Norskeren, will really need to step up in order to compete with top LCS players and even middle tier LCS players. Hikyu had the unfortunate situation of always playing on teams that weren't good, very simply put. I think he's been relegated 2 times at this point, which doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad player, but let me explain why it's still a bit of an issue. Maxtor, for example, now regarded as one of the best junglers that we have in Europe, also played on bad teams before. He also played on Giants. I believe this season, the split they got relegated. He played on Roccat, where they originally went 0-7 and then made the comeback for sure, and that was very awesome and exciting, but at the end of the day, they were in the relegation battle for 7, like they lost 7 games in a row, and then they had this mental series against Origin, which I had to watch live, and it was the biggest shit show. Holy shit. Please never do that again to me. But Maxtor was always able to stand out as a player, which is why he eventually got picked up by Misfits, and there he was able to show what he's actually about and mind blow everything and everyone at walls, essentially. Hikyu, despite playing on pretty bad teams, has not been able to do that yet. He's had his good 1 or 2 series, you know, the series that Ninjas in Pajamas won against Fnatic, for example, huge upset. He played really well in that, but in general terms, that he's not had the performance that you would expect from an LCS ADC. Norskeren, very talented. Thresh, wonder kid for sure, but it remains to be seen whether he can perform as well on other champions as he does on Thresh. And then there's Memento. Memento is decent. That's pretty much my opinion on Memento. And Profit has also an unfortunate circumstance of always, you know, having it brought up that he played on SKT, then he went to Europe, played for Ninjas in Pajamas, and yeah, played for arguably one of the worst teams in the league. So I think people on one hand like to overrate him because he played on SKT, and other people like to underrate him because he played on NIP. I think he's going to be an average top laner, in all honesty. And the general team doesn't look bad, but it also doesn't look too convincing. And when you look at the structure and team chemistry of like other teams, essentially, you'd expect other teams to simply do better. Similar things apply to 7th place, HK. H2K is also a tough one. When I originally thought about this topic about 2 weeks ago, I actually placed H2K lower. But the more I think about them, they actually have fantastic potential. Kadrol is a really good mid laner if he gets the chance to carry. Sheriff has amazing mechanics. He's shown that in solo queue, and if you like watch some of the streams, it's pretty damn decent. Santorin, Smitty J are not bad. They are not insane, and I wouldn't call them like fantastic talents, you know, coming into the league, but they are definitely good. They can keep up with other players. And then there's Sprattle. A lot of hate for Sprattle usually, but even on NIP, he played pretty damn okay. Like, his roaming was pretty damn decent, and you'd expect him, with all the experience he has, to at least guide the team in some aspects. And that should be helpful for H2K. Veteran coming in as a coach. Excited about that, not gonna lie. But yeah, so Kadrol and Sheriff have so much potential that this team could still make playoffs. But if the team fails, it's going to be very hard for this team to come back. And, you know, Santorin and Smitty J are alright. So, they're, in overall terms right now, they look okay with pretty damn good potential for mid lane and their ADC. Not enough to challenge top tier teams, but enough to challenge for playoffs, essentially. So that's why I put them 7th. Now, in 6th place, we got the Unicorns of Love. Why? People constantly like to say Unicorns of Love have picked up new people, they're not going to be good enough, they're not going to be playoffs material, they're not going to go anywhere in the regular season or playoffs, and they usually excel the opinion of the general public. That said, losing Vizicachi has to be a tough blow. Losing Hilly-sang is not that amazing either, even though Hilly-sang has had his issues in terms of play in the past splits as well. People always like to bring up Exile, which we'll talk about in 1 second, but Hilly-sang has also not been playing that well. They lost Romain, which is a piece of infrastructure, but they got a new coach, new manager, of course, so at least they replaced him in a way. But in general, they lost 3 players. They also lost Xerxes. They lost their manager. What can they do? They picked up White Knight, who I think will be very, very nice to watch. I think if you are playing Fantasy LCS and everyone's already picked, you know, all the top players are gone essentially, and you still have to look for a top laner, definitely you should look for either Prophet or White Knight essentially, because they'll still get you points. I'm very much certain about that. Samex is a very good ADC, and they got to keep him. Very nice decision. I mean, he still has a contract until the end of the year, but, you know, players can be bought out, even though it's a bit rarer in esports, I guess. They picked up Cold, formerly known as Trashy, who will, what I would expect, kind of fill in the veteran role that is now lost within the team now that Vizicachi and Hilly-sang are gone. There needs to be at least one player who's been around the scene for a very long time, who's been through a lot, who's gone through, you know, relegations and Worlds maybe, and he's done exactly that. He's been to Worlds, and even though he's not the most exciting player to watch anymore, and as a jungler by himself, I don't think he's as good as at least like 4 or 5 ULCS junglers. Given the experience he brings, I think he's a very good fit for the team overall. They also picked up Totoro. Totoro is a very aggressive playmaking, mechanically versatile support. In that terms, he fits the Unicorns really well because Hilly-sang was a very similar kind of support player. That said, it remains to be seen whether his English will be good enough, essentially, at the end of the day. And then there's the big question mark. That is XLI. XLA, XL, however you like to call him. XL has had splits where he was insane, and he has had splits where he just dragged down the team. And the sheer amount of fluctuation is ridiculous if you actually look at it. That said, if he is able to replicate, you know, the summer 2016 XL and even, you know, the spring split 2017 XL, I definitely think that unicorns can pop off. And one more factor why I think unicorns specifically have an edge over the other teams that I listed below them is because we now look at a best of one system, and GP as a coach specifically is known for going with interesting non-meta picks at times that, you know, where you want to use the surprise factor to get in that cheeky win. Now in a best of three situation that can work once, but then the enemy team can just ban it out and they're fine. But in a best of one scenario, you just need that one surprise moment, that one surprise game to grab home, to take home that point, right? So I can, out of all the bottom 5 teams essentially, I would think that unicorns have the best chance of getting points against the top 5 teams because of their interesting way of picking up compositions and picking up champions. So yeah, some question marks remain still, which is why I think there is a clear cut between, you know, unicorns and the top 5. But that said, I can definitely see them going to playoffs, and you know, playoffs have their own rules essentially, so we'll have to see then. I'll probably make another video at that point. Which brings us to the top 5. I love the top 5, because the top 5 is so close to one another, if you think about it. At 5th place, we have Misfits. Now, I know what a lot of people are going to say, hey, they were the best performing EU team at Worlds, how can you put them at 5th place? Some people even say that Senkax is an upgrade to Power of Evil, so therefore they should be even better. To that, I disagree, but we'll talk about that in a second. In general terms, if you watched all of the EU LCS games of last year, even at the end of the summer split 2017, right before playoffs started, if you would have asked 100 EU LCS fans, you know, who will really succeed during this playoffs and do you think Misfits will go far? I think like 5 out of 100 people would have predicted Misfits going to the finals, or Misfits even qualifying for Worlds. Right before that playoffs, people thought, okay, we got G2 and Fnatic pretty much clear, and then we have like H2K, maybe Unicorns, and then there's like Splyce and Misfits, who are good enough for playoffs, but not good enough for properly competing for the top playoffs placements and Worlds. And everyone was wrong, or like the vast majority of people was wrong, me included. But you have to keep in mind that throughout spring and summer, Misfits were always a good team, but not a fantastic team. They had their upsets, they won again a series against G2, but in general terms, the team looked good, but not good enough. Come into playoffs, everything changes. Come into Worlds, everything changes. They surprise everyone, they kick out TSM, huge upset, and then the series against SKT, which they almost won. Insane. But are they gonna be able to replicate that insane run? I highly doubt it. I think to an extent the meta played into it. And I'm not trying to discredit any of the Misfits members by any means. What they did was amazing, and I thank you so much for what you did as an EU LCS fan, as an EU fan in general. That was fantastic, thank you so much. But the overall performance of the team throughout the past year has not been on the level that you would expect them in order to be a proper top-tier contender. So let's get into the players. They lost Power of Evil to who's gone to NA to Optic Gaming. They picked up Senkax, and Igna has gone back to Korea to the Barbecue Olivers, I believe. And they picked up Mickey X from Splyce. Both Senkax and Mickey X are very good players, or at least good players. But are they on the level of Power of Evil and Igna? I definitely don't think that Mickey X is on the level of Igna, simply because Igna at the end of like Summer Split was arguably the best support in the EU LCS. I mean, Che was really insane, Mithy was always really good, so you know there's a contest there for sure, but Igna was really freaking sick, even then. So he's not quite on that level you'd expect him to be. And for Senkax vs Power of Evil, Senkax mechanically might even be the better player than Power of Evil. However, what Power of Evil for me meant for Misfits was that he was always kind of the backbone of the team. He was not the flashiest player. At times he was, but usually not. Not as much as Senkax, for example, was at times. But he was always very, very reliable. Also in the way that he usually died at least once a game. But besides that, you could always rely on Power of Evil hitting that one really good shockwave. You know, that one really good play. That one Syndra ult that just snaps the game and just turns the game in a way that nobody really expected, but he does it anyway. In teamfights, he's always there, always dishing out damage, but also always making sure that he's not completely out of position. Hansama, for example, insane player at times, insane teamfighting at times, but also, at times he just dies randomly at the start of a teamfight, and then they just lose because, well, the AD carries that, misposition, GG. Power of Evil never had those issues, and that's why I rated him very highly, because his consistency level was just ridiculous. And in lane he was also very good, was able to keep up with most of the EU LCS mid laners, with the exception of Perks, I would say. So definitely a really good laner, and just so damn reliable. Now, with the new Misfits, you look at that team, and you think, okay, Max Lore now has a lot of work on his hands, because before he didn't really need to care about Power of Evil doing well, because he just usually does. Senkax probably needs a bit more help. Senkax, probably, from what we've seen so far from him, isn't just as consistent and reliable as Power of Evil. If he gets to that level, Misfits are definitely one of the contenders for first place. But I've not seen that performance yet from Senkax, that kind of performance, and I think that specific kind of performance is now needed at Misfits. Other than that, they got to keep their almost entire staff in terms of coaching and analysts and stuff, so that's very helpful for them, of course, and I still expect them to have very insane games against all the teams that I'm going to list now. Nonetheless, 5th place, sorry Misfits fans. That said, in summer, it could be a completely different thing. And hey, maybe I'm just wrong, and you can be happy about that. So, in 4th place, Schalke. Schalke, however you like to pronounce it, Schalke 04. Very interesting team, for sure. Vizicachi, Pride Stalker, Nuke Duck, Upset, Vander. So many amazing players, and Pride Stalker. Pride Stoker has not been able to show, in honesty, that he's on the same level as his teammates. That said, with a team like that, I definitely can see him doing exceptionally well. Nuke Duck is an insane mid laner. You know, all the other EU LCS mid laners rate Nuke Duck very, very highly. You have to keep that in mind. Like, Perks and Caps both went like, yeah, well, I'm the best in EU, but after me comes Nuke Duck, because he's just so insane. So there must be something that he does in scrims as well, but even on stage, he's always been performing exceptionally well. It's just that his past teammates have kind of dragged him down. There's not really a nice way to say that. So now, Nuke Duck Unleashed, damn, very excited about that. Vizicachi, I don't think we really need to talk about how good he is, how much potential he has. Very insane player still. Crepo as the head coach, very excited about that, in honesty. Crepo was able to take a Splyce team that was very clearly the 6th best team in Summer Split 2017 and make them get, make them take G2 to Game 5 in a best of 5 series, which is just insane, because G2 from then on just stomped everyone and didn't care at all. But through 3 weeks of coaching with Crepo, supposedly, Splyce went just Super Saiyan mode. So what can he do when he has an entire split and like the entire preseason and everything? Very excited about that team. Upset. Super excited about him. The great German prospect, the next Hansama maybe. Let's not overhype him too much, but we all know he has a lot of potential. We're all very excited to see him play. Probably the most exciting rookie to see. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes Rookie of the Split award. And Vander is just, you know, pure consistency, so not much to question there. That said, the team is probably going to need some time in order to compete with the likes of, Fnatic and G2 and Splyce at the end of the day, which I'll be talking about in a second, why I rated them so highly. So Schalke, definitely very, very excited about the team, but they probably just need some time to get their synergy right, and by summer I expect them to be, a top 3, top 2 team even, because the potential of that team is insane. With Crepo as a coach, so good, so good. Very excited about that team, but they're gonna need time. That's my personal prediction. Third place, G2. Never count out G2. And I originally thought, they lost so many players, or they changed 4 players, right? They got a new coach, everything's new about this team, they're gonna need some time as well. To an extent. Only to an extent in comparison to other teams, and here's why. Shonen and Wadid are, in the same way that Sven and Mithy are just the perfect duo. They just work together so nicely. If you hear them talk about each other, it's so nice. And they just have fantastic synergy. So they're probably just gonna transition into the new team perfectly without any issues. Also because they picked up Grabs, former Roccat coach, as the new G2 coach, which obviously helps Shonen and Wadid massively as well, because they've worked together for a year now. I think Grabs and Shonen even longer potentially. So that's perfect as well. Perks, best mid laner in the LCS, that's not even a question at this point. Jankos, at least one of the best junglers in the LCS, also very exciting. And then there's Wonder, who for me kind of is the question mark in that team, because he has had games where he was insane, and then he has had games where he went 0-7 against Odoamne. In general, I think Wonder is good, but if he has to go up against a very confident top laner as Odoamne or Vizicachi or to an extent Soaz, he usually can't keep up, at least in the past. But now that he gets to play with Jankos, that might change. So a very exciting team, but again, synergy needs to be built and stuff needs to be seen. That said, I think best of one also favors them in comparison to like Misfits or Schalke, for example, because Perks is just a complete beast. The bot lane is going to do well. Jankos is so damn aggressive and is usually able to take, the first games and then gets banned out and all that sorts of things. So excited again. However, I think Fnatic and Splyce simply have an edge over them, and I'm going to explain why now. With Splyce, I put them in second place, which is pretty damn high for a team that was just molded from the ground as well, with the exception of Kabi being the only player who has previously played on Splyce. So, let me explain my reasoning. They picked up Peter Dunn as the head coach. For those of you that don't know, Peter Dunn, half British, half Chinese, I believe, has worked with Chinese teams before, went to Worlds with them as an analyst. Then went to Brazil to be a head coach for INTZ, which you might recall. They went to 2016, to the 2016 rendition of Worlds, and they played pretty damn well. They only took one game, I believe it was against EDG even, but ended the group in last place. That said, their games against the likes of HDK, for example, were all very good. Like, they weren't the kind of wildcard team where just went, they're just gonna lose, or whatever. I can skip that game, whatever. No? They actually almost got several wins. They just weren't able, at the end of the day, to properly beat the likes of EDG and H2K consistently. But they showed glimpses of what they were able to do. Now, and by the way, if you ask Brazilians, he still has worked in Brazil afterwards. He was the Brazilian All-Stars coach. And if you ask Brazilians essentially view or talk about Peter Dunn in the same way that Europeans talk about Daler. That's how highly regarded he is in Brazil at this point. So now he went to Splyce, and essentially he got to pick his players, which is just relatively uncommon in esports, but I definitely think is a fantastic approach. And he picked up some of the best players in the league. He picked up Oruamne, insane top laner. He picked up Xerxes, rookie of the Spring Split, ULCS Spring Split 2017. Insane player, was able to show what he's about. He picked up Niski, very excited about him getting back to EU, played decently well on Envy, and I think he's still got a lot of potential. Kobe, just very consistent, good ADC, not the top ADC, but definitely good ADC. And Kasing, who, even though he's not played in LCS for a while now, when he was in LCS, he was a freaking beast, and also brings a lot of experience and some fantastic shot calling with him. That said, besides all of the players already being really promising, if you then have a coach who specifically can go like, okay, I want these players, I want to fulfill my vision that I have for the team, that is, for me, the perfect recipe for success. Because, especially in a best of one situation, the coach's work is so very important. And if he can just create his super team, his vision, if the coach is good, then the team should be pretty much set up for success. So unless Peter Dunn is a bit overhyped, which he might be, but I'm very excited about his coaching work, then this team will succeed big time. And even when I did my interview with Xerxes, shortly after he transferred to Splyce, you know, I was asking him, you know, you got several offers from NA teams, you got several offers from EU teams, why did you go with Splyce specifically? He said, well, they kind of came in last second. I was already, you know, mentally playing with a different team. And I got to talk to Peter for only like a relatively short amount of time. But I realized, holy shit, that guy knows his stuff. And he literally told me, man, I would have been disappointed if someone else would have gotten to work with him instead of me. Which again just shows me personally how much of an amazing coach Peter must be, or at least how much insane knowledge he must carry with himself. And, you know, looking at some of the players, I'm so excited to see Oruamne and Xerxes play together. Niski in a really good team looks so good. Kasing back in the EU LCS. That team looks so exciting, so promising. And technically, maybe they still need time. Maybe, you know, the factor that I put in with the other teams, that they need that time to build up synergy and teamwork. Maybe it's the case here as well. Maybe they won't succeed until summer. But if or the moment summer comes, I expect that team to kick ass properly and be a title contender at the end of the day. I definitely expect that team to do so damn well. And my personal prediction is that they already do well in Spring Split, but they might take some time, of course. So in first place, we got Fnatic. Is there that much to say about Fnatic? I mean, Fnatic has like the perfect hand, right? All the other teams in the league had to replace at least 2 players. They only picked up 1 new player on their own merit, essentially. They were like, yeah, okay, yes, this is good, but Reckless really likes Hili-san, and the rest of the players probably have a very high opinion of him as well. It's an option. Do we pick him up? Yep. Okay. Awesome. Do we change anything else? We'll get in Joey and just boost our infrastructure a bit. And that's pretty much it. Yep. Synergy already there. Insane talents are still there. Caps and Boxer still have a lot of room to grow, but are already on a very high level. And then you have Reckless and Soaz. And I mean, yeah. What do you expect of Reckless and Soaz all of a sudden to do not well? I mean, that's ludicrous. That's absolutely insane. So they just upgraded one of their positions, upgraded the infrastructure, and other than that, yeah, they're Gucci. So all of the negative factors that other teams have, all of the disadvantages that other teams have, they don't. They already have all the synergy. They already have a fantastic team of fantastic players. So I expect them to go like, yeah, 16-2 or something like that, 17-1 maybe. They'll probably drop a game at one point. I don't expect them to do the perfect split again, but they just look so good. and you just don't see any reason why you wouldn't put them as first, essentially. Because all the other teams, yeah, have some kind of issue that they have to deal with, that they'll have to fix, or that they'll simply have to work with over the time. But Fnatic doesn't. Fnatic just, you know, laying back, yeah, we got this. So I definitely expect them to place first. And then in summer, that's where they really be challenged by other teams, by the likes of Schalke, G2, Misfits even, and Splyce, of course, as well. Because that's where the other teams have found their point, have found their team, have found their synergy and everything. And that's where stuff gets really damn interesting. But nonetheless, spring already looks super exciting. I'm super happy about it. If you do like the ULCS and you want to watch video interviews with ULCS players, then subscribe to this channel, because I'll be doing tons of them. I'll be attending every single day of ULCS, doing interviews every single day of ULCS, and you can be very excited about that. If you have any suggestions, any comments to make, of course, please leave them under here, or I guess if you come from Reddit, under the Reddit thread. I'll try to talk with you guys as much as possible, and yeah. Let me know what your personal predictions are. I love how much debate there is about the upcoming split. There's so much talk, and it's so much fun, because nobody can agree on one specific listing. Like, everyone has at least 1 or 2 teams switched, and it's super exciting. I love it. It's going to be super awesome. I'm hyped. I hope you are as well. And I'll see you guys at the ULCS in person, or maybe we'll talk online. See ya then. Bye-bye.